think overwhelmingly COD fans like enjoyed this game, but there were some casual people I know more so that didn't like this game, and I'm not sure if it's just like bad SBMM or something, but like as far as like gunplay and mechanics, this game, there are still things that they need to fix I don't like, but as far as for a pub game, I thought this was pretty good out of the box. I feel you. I think SBMM is an issue. I can understand for a lot of people why it's not great.
Welcome everyone to episode 148 of the COD Casuals. We're your host, Justin.
And I'm Mike.
How you doing, Mike?
Doing good, man. Had a good day at work. It was a long day, which sucked.
That was a long day for me too.
Yeah, it's always a long day at school, but what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So we got done with that. Now we're sitting down. We're going to go play COD after this for sure.
Yeah.
But we have a very, very special guest, Justin. If you'd like to introduce this person to us.
Yeah. And yeah, guys, we're obviously online this time. We've got a very special guest with us. If you follow the competitive Call of Duty scene, like you definitely know of him. He was formerly an analyst and manager for FaZe Clan. Most recently, he was part of Esports Engine. Today, he's a full-time content creator. He's a co-host and executive producer of The Flank. Let's welcome Ben J Nissim.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat, and I agree with you guys. Fridays, recording this on a Friday, as someone that used to have a full-time job, I hated doing that. I hated having any meeting after 1 p.m. because I just wanted to go be somewhere else. So I feel you guys after a long Friday, just want to unwind, hang out with the squad, play some COD. Feel you on that.
Yeah, man. That's what we do pretty much every day. I mean, we both work. We've mentioned to our viewers before. So Justin's in the financial realm, and then I'm a school teacher. So when we get done, it's a long day, and then it's usually around like 8 or 9, and we've been playing together forever. That's usually what we do. We hop on. We're enjoying Modern Warfare 3, unlike some people who say that they don't like the game, but we're having fun with it.
Yeah, it's odd to me, like, because I know there was a lot of chatter, so like I played the game early. I went, got invited to LA. Shout out Rob Taylor and Shanice over at Activision invited me. Oh, they invited Tom. The story was they invited Tom, and then Tom couldn't go because he had to go to his brother's bachelor party, and he was like, "Give the spot to Ben." So I was like, "I bet." So I pulled up. And at the time when I played there, like overwhelmingly all the creators were like, even for it being in a beta state, like this game's really good. Even the people that played over the summer. The beta came out that was good, and the full game came out that was good. And I saw that like, there were like all the creators I know, and it's not like a bias thing. It's not like they're trying to, keep the relationship going. Like I think overwhelmingly COD fans like enjoyed this game, but there were some casual people I know more so that didn't like this game. And I'm not sure if it's just like bad SBMM or something, but like I don't know. I find as far as like gunplay and mechanics, this game, there are still things that they need to fix I don't like. But as far as like as for a pub game, I thought this was pretty good out of the box.
Yeah. Mike and I we talked about that. Like our buddies that they play super casually, they like the game, but the problem is I think it is a SBMM, and they've just gotten so used to the fast TTK like over the years because a lot of them skipped over Cold War because they. And so now going to MW3, obviously the health is 150, and a lot of people aren't used to that longer TTK.
I mean, it's just the longer TTKs is better. I mean, you guys probably all agree. Like, the problem with the fast TTK is it makes the online gameplay like really consistent. Like I play a lot like East Coast, West Coast eights, and if like on old games, if like anyone West Coast like Tommy hosted, like, and I was on 8 ping, I was like, nah, this ain't fun. But I feel you. I think SBMM is an issue, and I can understand for a lot of people why it's not great. I know that Sledge recently, as of yesterday, I think kind of addressed SBMM, and it sounds like it doesn't sound like they're trying to fix it. It sounds like they're going to put out a post and kind of explain their philosophy and maybe kind of get some kind of community conversation, and maybe we can collectively come with some kind of middle ground. But yeah, I feel that. I also saw there was a lot of criticism of the campaign. That was probably the weakest part of the game for me. Is like I know some people like the open world campaign, but I thought it was very short. Last year's campaign was great. The one like I only played a couple of full time COD campaigns recently, and that was one that I played start to finish and really liked. This one I was like, after a couple hours, I was like, it's not worth finishing. Is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, we did a whole talk on it because that was like most people, we got it early access and then we started playing it and we couldn't believe how short it was. And then realizing after the fact that it was definitely kind of slapped together last minute, like the whole game as a whole was. You could definitely then see the holes in the campaign. Because I agree with you. I think past CODs have always done a really good job with the campaigns, for the most part. Even Vanguard, which I know most people hate or they put up there as one of their least favorite CODs, that campaign was so much better than what we got this time around. I hated those DMZ type missions that were given in it. Um,
Yeah.
I get what they were trying to do with it, but I think it was just executed poorly. But I'm curious if they're going to do anything with it going forward, if they're going to keep that going and refine it, or they're just going to scrap it all together.
My guess is because of the sort of reporting we got around the development of this game that it was a time thing. That was a decision. My guess is the decision they made in order to ship a solid-ish campaign was to go down that route. So I know it was a little bit easier on the design path. I assume next year, with supposedly Treyarch having a pretty good runway to have made this next game, that we'll probably see a more full-throated campaign. But obviously, that to me is why I think they made decision for campaign this game, and I don't blame them, bro. I assume being a developer for one of these studios where you don't get 2 or 3 years to do a game, you get a year and a half, it's got to be really tough, and you got to make some very difficult design decisions, and that was probably one of them.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, Mike and I both definitely feel for the people on the dev side. I know I personally work with like a lot of developers at my job, and I could not do the work that they do. The amount of problems that we always have, we're always submitting like tickets to them. They've got a lot on their plate. And story overall, again, like we said, it wasn't our favorite, but my biggest gripe with the campaign was the actual ending of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it didn't follow the storyline of traditional Modern Warfare. So that kind of that upset us as campaign fans. Before jumping into like all this COD, which we've already sort of done, do you want to give like an introduction of yourself, who you are, how you got into like COD overall?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak on it. So, I've been playing COD for like a really long time. I used to play a lot of Halo, and I started playing COD with my Halo friends around Call of Duty 2. Um, a lot of people like in the Rooster Teeth community. That's kind of where I originally came from. So I did that for a long time. Like played like every COD game that came out, except for World of War. For whatever, I don't remember why I skipped World of War. I might have been college or something. I don't really remember. Um, so did that, and then when Black Ops 2 came out, one of my friends was like, "Yo, like, there's this competitive scene, this COD champs, this champions thing happening like in the spring. Like, you should watch." I was like, "I bet." I tuned in, watched a lot of Nade Shot play. Watched a lot of Express S&D. I'm like, "This is pretty lit." Like more lit than like the pubs. I started really getting into like watching the comp scene that year. Um, really got into it, I think probably and Ghost because that was the first event I attended was X Games Austin. Um, at the tent at the CODA, the Circuit of the Americas in Austin. I was living there at the time. And I got hooked. Like I saw the proof. I was there for the proof 4 piece. So I was like, all right, this is where it's at. So started hanging out there. I used to then hang out a lot in Clayster's chat, and Clay eventually made me a mod in his chat. Used to steal. I used to be like, I used to type in chat like, oh man, like you guys are just like not calling out your spawns like in the chat. And then all of a sudden Clay would say it to his teammates. And I'm just like, well, he's just stealing all the things that I say. You just say back to like Joey D and Ant. So I was in Clay's chat for a long time. I was good friends with Clay. Went to the next event I went to was Champs AW Champs in LA. That's where I like met a lot of people for the first time. Like I met Clay, I met his family, um I met Ian there for the first time. Who else I made that event? Optic guys, some of them I'd already met before from when they came to Austin. Um, and I got hooked. I was like, this bad. Like I met Hitch there for the first time at that event. Like Davis and I had known each other at that point for a while. And the reason we had known each other is because starting in December the year prior, I actually started doing some work for a Twitter account that's no longer around, Optic Intel, which I think used to be like COD Intel. I don't remember what it used to be before Hector got involved with it, but basically it was like it used to be like CDL Intel or like any one of these like COD Twitter accounts before they existed. Um, I think Deserto had like the first edition of Deserto had like come and gone at that point, so even Deserto wasn't around that early. Um, And so we were like, and I sort of volunteered on the social media side. Like we were the ones tweeting out match results at events, like graphics, brackets, like all that stuff. So I did that, volunteered that for pretty much all the AW year. At one point in the AW year, I went to Hector and I said, yo, like I'd love to like, because I was working for an ISP at the time. I was like, yo, I want to like make this a full-time thing. Like I'll run the Optic Twitter account for $2,000 a month. And I found the email the other day. It was really funny. It was a good email. And Hector was like, "Nah, like like I'm still doing a thing, but I appreciate it." And then unfortunately, what happened with Optic Intel was Davis, aka Hitch, like he started doing like Vision, started doing more content stuff. So he just didn't have the time to run Intel, and sites like Deserto would come back at that point. I just don't think for them it made sense to continue that. But it worked out for me because I started getting close with the FaZe Clan guys, especially guys like Temper and Banks, the team obviously as well. Like Tommy and Ian and Dylan and Clay and all them, but Ricky and Tommy, who at the time were intimately involved with the team business. This is before any of the professional folks that come in at FaZe, like, are still the owners basically running the show, them and Seabass. And so going to Black Ops 3 with Ban and Protect coming in, there was a conversation to be had about, wow, we really need someone to like help with just collecting a lot of data, like really keeping us focused on what we want to work on in scrims, like kind of working on how we want to game plan people and Ban and Protect and matches. So I got involved with them as an analyst for the beginning of that year up until about after South Carolina. Just because the economics at that point didn't really work for FaZe. They at that point actually brought in their first iteration of ownership. So I had about a couple months break. At that point, they were living in Austin, so I'd still hang out with them like on a bi-weekly basis. Ian's PC would break, and he'd be like, "Yo, come over and like fix my PC." I'm like, "I have like 15 minutes, so I said come over." And then once the Claser trade happened, because Clay, and for people didn't watch at the time, like in Infinite Warfare, the team kind of blew up. They'd been together for a long time. They had a lot of success in AW. Black Ops 2, they were good, but not great. IW started off the year good, and things kind of got south from there, and so the team kind of broke up to an extent. There was a trade. Gunless came over to FaZe. Clay went off to United, and also Crowder, who was coaching the team at the time, started to start playing again. So he went off to Echo Fox. So there was nobody like managing the team, coaching the team. So Ian hit me up and Abel, and he was like, "Yo, you want to come in for sort of the last event?" I said, "I bet." So I did that, and then Eric Anderson, who's the head of esports at FaZe, sort of after the event, him and I had a conversation about me continuing, full time. The team was going to change a lot. Ian was leaving. Clay and Dylan and Zuma and Attach were staying, but they were bringing in Crowder back in. Crowder had a great event for Echo Fox, even though they didn't make it deep in the tournament. Crowder played well, and they were bringing over this kid Priesta from Cloud9. So they, were trying to build that team back up. And Eric's like, "Do you want to get involved in that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm down." So I ended up managing the team from that point on. A good group of guys. We had a lot of success that year in World War II. And then over sort of the offseason World War II, I started getting really involved in actually two other teams for FaZe. I started getting involved with Fortnite, especially at the beginning. That was a very complex ecosystem for FaZe because there was a lot of interest. It was an esports side to it and a talent side. So it was a very interesting kind of conversation that was always going on in terms of roles and responsibilities and how to manage. And some of the guys on the team were great. Some of them were sometimes difficult to manage because they were a little green. And I was also getting involved with our FIFA team at the time. So Taz and I talked a lot, even though he's an Arsenal fan, I was a Tottenham fan. So if you know anything about the Arsenal Tottenham rivalry, that was always fun. I did that until the next summer. So what happened the next summer was, and this is 2019, summer 2019. For those that are, been around the esports scene for a while, know who MLG is. MLG got bought a couple of years prior by Activision as part of they were trying to figure out their long-term esports play, and then they didn't sort of lost what they want to do with it because they were like, "Oh, we're going to do OWL, CDL, we're going to do these franchise leagues." So they actually were going to lay off everybody from MLG. And so that all got sorted, and they ended up actually spinning off into their own company. So they hit me up over the summer, and they were like, "Yo, you probably have heard that we're breaking off, doing our own thing. Would you like to join?" I said, I'd be interested. Hit me up kind of end of the year, because at the same time, for me on the FaZe Clan side, the Call of Duty team was transitioning being part of Atlanta FaZe, so the ownership entity of the team was changing. I would have still been involved, but it would have been in like a little bit of a different sort of almost external capacity. And so I was like, at that point, like, maybe a little bit more steady job. And my boss at the time, Eric, was like, if they offer you anything, like, take it because more than what I can get you. She's like, I bet we'll hit you up at the end of the year. And they call me like, I was like driving to go hang out with, I don't remember when this was, probably like after Champs at some point to go hang out for a weekend with Zero and Scraps in Frisco. So I was driving from Austin to Frisco. I got a call like in the middle of that drive from Rami over at Esports, and he's like, "Hey, so remember when I said I was going to hit you up in December? Well, we want you to start at the beginning of November. Would you be down?" So I made a big decision, like end of the summer. This is actually then not August, probably like beginning of September, to move end my lease, move to Columbus. So I moved to Columbus in fall 2019. Started working for Esports Engine in the sort of business development client services department. So the way that Esports Engine kind of ran their program project management and like kind of business development is they didn't really like, and I kind of agree with Adam App on this. He didn't really like this sort of thought process of when you're trying to get a new client in, that they're talking to sort of a business development guy. And then once that deal's won, you're then talking to a different like sort of project manager. He thought that those two roles could kind of work and be the same person. And then you can really establish a relationship, right? With upper management, with that person and the people below them that you're subject matter experts. So it was a really cool job. It was a challenge because obviously I joined right before COVID. The entire esports the world turned upside down during COVID. So we had to do that, but working there was great because I had known a lot of those people in an external capacity from being on the team side. Like we used to go to the MLG studio all the time. They used to yell at me all the time for using the bathroom in their office because it was way better, and the pros are always using the other bathroom. So I was like, I need to go. Like they're on stage, taking a bathroom break. Like too bad. Uh, but no, but they really liked, I had been always someone that was very transparent with them on what I think they needed to do better. I'd given them a couple of really good ideas they ended up actually implementing in the Black Ops 4 season. And so that was a fun job. I did that for about 2 years. And then 2020 was it at this point like 2022? Summer of 2022, Tom and I were talking and it became clear, I think, if I wanted to sort of take the next step with the flank and sort of where sort of the business was heading on the production side of my current job, I was like, I got to pick one or the other. I can't do both anymore. Because at that point, I was like, on the flank, and I was also for Esports Engine, like the main POC for all things like Activision. So I'm constantly walking this weird line of like, and people at Activision were aware, right? Like they loved me and they wanted me involved with the project, but they knew that like I'm teetering this weird edge of like talking about the league in like a pundit capacity and then also like doing all the event planning. That was kind of, I was like, I got to pick one or the other. So I talked to Adam App, talked with P Melican over there, and I was like, well, they're like, honestly, like if you want to do the content thing, you're young, like, there's always stuff on the other side will come back. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do that. So I left, and that was a big jump because I had no idea doing full-time content if that would be successful or not. And now about a year and a half in, and I love it. Stream quite a few days a week. We got watch parties coming up soon. Sort of the bulk of our normal activity starts next weekend with matches, so that's always really fun. Like my main gig, my main kind of when everybody tunes in is always the morning before matches, CDL matches. I'm usually live like 9 or 10 a.m. until matches start, and I'm always like the one live because everybody's just sort of getting ready and sort of drinking coffee, talking COD. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's been great to not have to wake up and get contracts and budgets approved. That was always the worst part of my business development side of the job. I enjoyed like the problem solving, like the project management side. I didn't enjoy like, working working trying to get a behemoth multi-billion-dollar company to like pay out invoices and like sign contracts. But yeah, no, that's the story. That's here to there. That's how I went from being a Twitch mod to like working and being the POC for a production company with Activision Blizzard to full-time content creation.
So now, after you had your event at Ghost that you went to for the first one in person, was it a pretty quick decision where you saw that happen? You're like, I got to get involved in this one way or another? Or was it kind of like, oh, wow, this is really cool. And then you eventually started seeing the other positions open up within esports and realizing, wow, I can do something other than just being on stage competing?
Uh, I think it was a little bit slower. The job esports thing really didn't come until like a year later. You know, it was more like me and my friend Ray. Um, Me and my friend Ray and a couple other people like always just kind of talking about esports casually. And it was more of it was more of a like hobby interest. I didn't really think there were jobs in it until really like the end of AW, when it was clear that like these teams were starting to scale up. Many of them didn't really have coaches or analysts at the time because they had banned. There used to be coaches on stage back in like Black Ops 2, and they banned it after that year because all the coaches did was just talk shit to other people. Like you probably can look up the videos of like Mr. X, who now works for Overwatch League, or I'm not sure what's going on there, but he used to be coaching like Clay and Aix and Karma and Teeping them on COL, and all he would do is just like yell at like people across the stage. Like there's a funny clip of him like yelling at methods that I know Zin talks about a lot, but yeah, it wasn't really like I didn't see the prospects for it until really the year after, when it was clear like these teams were starting to really kind of scale up beyond just being a hobby business to actually trying to run a real business and be less of a passion project for someone that's got some funding to more of like trying to scale like a front office.
Hmm. Now, did you have like, did you have any aspirations at all to ever be a competitor while you're like surrounded by these other pro players? Like, while you're managing like the FaZe players, did that ever like pop into your head ever?
No, because I knew I wasn't good enough.
Awareness.
I wasn't. I never really had the aspiration. Really wanted to compete. I more enjoyed like kind of being on the other side of it. And so that was never like that thought never crossed my mind.
Yeah, I mean, so it seems like you've found your avenue outside of competing, obviously, and you've been very successful at it. And then that big pivot for you now, like most people, even some of our audience who may know you, and then pretty much everybody that's in the scene knows you because you're on the flank. And you talked about that difficulty of a jump to go and move from your full-time job to now doing the flank. Um, Overall, did you think that doing the flank with other professional players, and then you being somebody who doesn't have the professional player background, but having a background in the scene and knowing a lot, um, were you ever worried about that, or do you ever think about that rift that you might have to face that on the show with? Because for people who don't know, on that show, it's all former professional players on
And
there.
me, what did he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is like a Brian. There's a Twitter guy named Brian Stats. He's a good guy. He like tweeted out
Yep.
the other day like the Flame crew is like stacked. They've got like all these rings. Like every one of them is competed at like a national championship. They've won a tournament like every Call of Duty, and then everybody replies, and then they're like, "And me." No, just like all right. But to answer your question, by the time we started the flank, by the time Tom had retired and we decided to do the show together, like I had known the pros for a very long time at that point. And I knew that and was prepared for the eventuality if I was ever going to do content or always come on stream, which I used to occasionally, like just hang out on calls. And I knew people would just criticize my thoughts because I'm not a pro. And like pros talk shit about me. Like if you go and find old episodes of like Nameless's show, the Codcast, like there
Oh
are
yeah.
people that chirp me on that show before I was even a content creator. They were talking shit about me on there. And I was like, I know that like some of these guys aren't always going to respect my opinion just because I haven't played, but I look at it a different way, and I think people would appreciate that perspective. I think the other thing I knew that I would, I think bring in that kind of situation when I bring to the show is sort of the understanding of how the other side of it works, not the game development side, because Pat's really got that on handle. It's more the esports business, team business, production business side. People don't always understand why, all tournament organizers make X or Y or Z decision. The leagues make these decisions. People say, $1 billion company, why can't they do X, Y, and Z? Like I try to give people that insight, and that's not something that I expect like Tommy or Chris or Pat or Sam to really know because they never really had the experience on that side of the business.
Yeah, and I can tell you that definitely resonated with me when you and Tommy first started like doing the flank back in 2021.
Yeah.
And I was like, because Mike and I are both the glasses half full type of people, And there's always a reason why, people say $1 billion league. Why can't, they get these streams right? Whatever, right? But there's always underlying detail. There's a reason why things go wrong. And I think people have to learn and like just realize that these things happen, and these decisions aren't made just because you throw a ton of money at it and all of a sudden everything gets solved. Like, if anything, it's more problems.
Yeah, but I will say, like, I don't think I was very, and I still am critical of the city-based franchising model. I thought that venture wasn't really going to work because you're getting away from the history of what's there, and you're getting people to attach to local brands that might necessarily not really work. And it's not a recognition of like a global world that we live in, that like people are fans of, so and so team, like professional sports team, and they live in the Philippines or they live, in Iceland. Um, and so it was, to me, it felt like sports people, NFL people coming in trying to make esports like the NFL, the NBA, whatever, instead of recognizing that like that they don't need to fit a circle peg into a square hole. But obviously led to, I think the downfall was COVID basically blew up a lot of planning. Like they couldn't do any local market activation. Costs after COVID went up, especially event costs, power costs. And so like it probably sped up the depth of that experiment, but I was always critical of it from the start. And but that being said, I always feel like people don't always understand that, you can't just, if you've got a $10 million idea, you can't just tomorrow walk into the CEO's office and get that approved just because you think it's a good idea. I think people don't always understand that like the purse isn't always open just because a company got a gross revenue of $5-10 billion. It's so much harder to get stuff approved, and even then you get strings. So I just try to always give people the perspective as to why certain things happen, why they might be slow to announce stuff. And I think people appreciate that I get that perspective. I don't think it's a start people always did, but I think now people always kind of see where I'm coming from sometimes in those conversations.
Yeah, I think it's a perspective that's always kind of been lacking, especially over the years, because I know you're aware of it and we are too. Like most of the time, you're going to see the people on Twitter who are quick to comment on whatever it may be that's at hand. And like Justin said, they just don't understand what's going on the back end. Um, that being said, with a lot of our audience, I mean, because most of the people that are listening to us, they tend to like they do play ranked to an extent. But I don't know how many of them are big time CDL followers. Like they go and they're going to be watching the starting events coming up soon. How do you think the CDL has done overall with trying to grow the audience and trying to engage with more the pubs, and just the casual players who maybe hop on once or twice a week compared to other sports like, other franchise leagues like the NFL or the NBA, where they've done such a good job. Granted, they've had more time, but that's their core audience.
Is your question like what is a question more about Activision or like Activision and what the teams and the players have done? Like,
Um, I would probably say with Activision.
I think that the first year and a half, I think they made a lot of mistakes in terms of their social media approach. Again, I think the biggest mistake that Activision made was not bringing on Adam and the MLG's team and the people that had built the scene to what it was, and brought in all these new sports people that had kind of a twisted view on what esports was. I think they misunderstood that this isn't like Manchester United, Barcelona. There's not enough history in these clubs where, yes, a superstar comes in, a Galacticos, and they're playing for a badge that's meant something for 100 years. Like even brands like Optic and FaZe were at best 9 or 8 years old. There was no history there. And so it's more about the superstars, more about the players. And I think they really failed to recognize how to market around those individuals until about I think the middle of COVID. Then they really started getting it, and I think their social media vendor really started getting it in terms of a lot of the like extra content they did. So I would say they've done an okay but not amazing job. I think there's a lot of things that I would have done differently. Um, and I think they've corrected some of those lessons. But in the end of the day, I actually think there's only so much that the CDL can do as far as that marketing and growth. The best thing they can do to me is make the league and the league content available on as many platforms as possible. The best marketing is always gonna come from the players. The strength of the Call of Duty scene is actually just like with the NBA, it's about the drama, baby. Like, it's about
Mhm.
all the beef on social media, about the people talking shit about each other on streams. That stuff and being able for the league really wasn't willing to talk about that stuff until Esports Engine, I think, got involved. And that was a key thing for us when we took over, started doing broadcasting um Cold War was just like not Cold War, rather, the Vanguard was just like getting back to the roots of like that stuff's not taboo to talk about. GA is not taboo to talk about. Like, people beefing with each other on Twitter, not taboo to talk about. Like, sometimes showing Twitch corrupts on stream, we have to kind of censor them a lot. But like that stuff is what drives the conversation and gets casuals involved because then they understand the stakes, you know? Because so many, especially with CDL, a lot of majority of the matches, these online qualifier matches, they don't really have the stakes. But they sometimes do when you look at like what happened last year with Standy getting dropped from Ultra and going to Vegas, and suddenly they played each other like 2 weeks later. There's a match for 10 CDL points, sure, but there was a lot of beef on the line because of the bad blood and sort of like, so that's my kind of thought process on how they probably could have done something better marketing wise.
That that totally makes sense. The COD drama is we live for that, and I'm sure any fan that follows the CDL they live for that. They love the player drama. Where do you lie on either focusing more on getting like competitive fans into following the CDL or trying to get the more casual fan base, like our fan base, into the CDL? Do you think there's one way that uh, the CDL should really focus on, or do you think they should try to capture everyone?
I think to me, there's two. One is, I think, going back to more multi-game, and I mean specific to like the COD IP, like what they did at Raleigh last year with Major One
Mhm.
style events. I think like constantly creating sort of natural, not forced ways that there's synergy between COD Mobile, Call of Duty Warzone fans, will help a lot of like word of mouth growth in these areas. Think of like what at the end MLG Anaheim meant to the community in California by the end of it, and you've seen what it does in like CS with like events like Katowice and Cologne. But that only gets you so far. I think as far as like online stuff, it always comes down to like, you know, promoting the league and sort of the league stuff within the game, within sort of launch content, talking about it more on investor calls and things like that. I think there's only, like I said, there's only though I think so much that Activision can do to make that crossover. Because I think that there are ways that the communities themselves aren't always going to be like compatible. I
Mhm.
think there's always going to be different schools of thought between the pub community and the comp community about, you know, TTK, about snipers, about the GAs snaking. Like, there's always going to be like sort of like a disconnect. But I think what Activision can do best is just create more server space and then kind of let the growth happen. The growth's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be explosive. Likely, it's going to be casual, or sort of it's going to be gradual rather. But at least create more pathways for it to happen. I think right now they're doing some things right, and I think there are things they can improve.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, and like what I had said before about my question regarding Activision, it also then lies on the teams individually too, right? Like there's some teams that do a really good job with the outreach aspect. And then, I mean, we both have watched the Flank episodes and other COD talks and seen on Twitter where there's some teams that they put in little to no effort with trying to get people engaged or at least trying to build a fan base around their team, you know?
Yeah, and like for us, we're from the Boston area, and Mike and I have always we've been wanting a Boston team since we started the pod, and finally when Boston decided to come in, and we're very very happy as fans that as soon as they jumped in, they started like running events. They started like getting their fans engaged. They started like
Yeah.
hosting watch parties, and that goes a long way to getting a lot more people into the scene.
I think for the Boston Oxygen group, what probably helps is it's a combination of like, and we worked with them a lot because obviously we were at their major last year, gonna be at their major again this year. Um, I've known Adam Morrison for like a minute when he was at Reciprocity, and now he's at Oxygen, and the Breach guys sort of the guys that are involved with the craft side of that business or local guys from Boston, family from Boston, they really care about trying to build something um, in that local market. And I think they've also recognized like kind of the voice the team needs to have. Like sometimes these teams come in non-endemics and they're like too gun shy in how they want to conduct themselves marketing wise. Like Boston's been definitely willing to like, kind of get involved, especially with the subliners. I think that was like really the sort of first sort of social beef they had with the subliners. Um, but yeah, I think that's one example of a market that's done it great. I think example of a team, unfortunately, in a situation that's done poorly both in CDL and OWL is the Paris Vegas franchise. Like they put in minimal effort, no watch parties. They haven't done anything in marketing in Vegas. They did some stuff in Paris in the beginning. They had a very nice venue. But then COVID hit, and I felt like always that franchise has always been more of a like classic VC exit play. Like they got in to take advantage of the valuation. They were hoping that it would 5x. Then they can just sell the spot to someone else or license the spot and someone carry the cost and they can take all the upside. And they've been an example of, I think, some of the problem in this of just not really in it for the growth and the engagement. But like other franchises I want to shout, they're non-endemics because the endemics, like your LA Thieves, Optic, Texas, Atlanta FaZe, like they know what they're doing. But other teams like New York's done a great job. Minnesota Rockers done a great job. Um, or I think like to me, Toronto Ultra is another one that's done a really good job. There are other franchises in the league I think have done good jobs as well, but those in particular are ones that I think have done a good job engaging the local market, running events, bantering on Twitter, like really getting involved. And now they're part of the identity of the scene, as opposed to if the CDL ends or not. Like, some of the other franchises I think will just get lost to time, and those ones I think won't. The ones I named.
Yeah,
Mhm.
no, I would definitely agree. I mean, I think too, because of what you had touched on regarding those top teams have been around or had a space in the league before, and people had that brand, like they're familiar with it. That definitely carried them into the CDL. They just ended up riding with it. Um, I think another thing too, and you can let me know if you agree or not. I think a big thing too is having these players showcased, like who they are as individuals. I think there's a lot of these teams where like they don't show enough about these people. Like you don't get to see the skits, you don't get to see them just hanging out, relaxing and screwing around. And like having that sort of team chemistry. I think that's a big part of it too for just the casual person because we can all relate to that, instead of just seeing them up on stage playing because it's very hard to relate to that for anybody on a casual side. You agree with that?
Yeah, and that's why I think like Optic has always done a good job of building their brand because they always keep that door open. You're always aware of what's going on behind the scenes with that team, and people feel like they're part of the unit. Now, there are some downsides when you keep that door that open. You get kind of this weird parasocial relationship, and it can have its issues. Like the team was one of the slower teams to start scrimming this year because Pred had to wait to get his P1 visa approved, and so he didn't get in right away. And they got on. They played a scrim against an amateur team and got slammed, and then they got bullied on like social media, Reddit, which was not great. But there's some franchises I think have done really poorly with their like behind the scenes stuff. Again, Paris Vegas, a good example. Like, has never really built a story around their team, even when they had like Clay and Temp, who were two of the most outspoken, sort of unique personalities in the scene last year. They did zero content around them. Um, so, again, that's another thing that got kind of lost in all of this is like I think when all these teams had to spin up their businesses year zero, they didn't really know how to approach content game. And a lot of people had bad hires. A lot of people then, because of COVID, got rid of their content team. And so these some of these franchises really just didn't get it and still haven't gotten it about how to from their side what they can do to grow the brands of these teams and players. Although I will say one perspective is always is there is some onus on the player to grow their individual brand as well. Like the team can only do so much. As a player, you got to get out there, do podcasts, do interviews, be on social media, make videos, stream. Like, obviously some of these guys make six figures, great, but like that only gets you so far as brand building and like winning, tournaments. Like you got to actually get the other stuff going too.
Mhm. Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. Not just for the players' sake, because I mean, we've watched these players for like years now, and it's a shame to see some of them that chose not to do that, which they have every right to, but choose to only compete. And like, there's only so many spots in the league, and now they're not in the league. and now they have to go and figure out what they have to do like afterwards. But just streaming and doing all of that helps a lot of casual people just even like jump into the scene. Like, if you fall in love with the personality and then you start learning more about them, you're most likely going to follow what they're doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you always look at those at the top people too, like Scump or any of these guys who always had big personalities and had a big following. The one thing that they all did was they were either always in content or they were streaming all the time. You know, to people like the casual fan base who was just going to be hopping on Twitch and going to see who's playing Call of Duty, who's playing Warzone. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I think Seth is though an extreme example because he got
Yeah.
so big before really like when they were still playing for $100 that by the time it got really really big, like he was an established brand. My thing is more of a criticism of players who have gotten in the league the last couple of years, who there were a couple that like streamed a lot before they were pros and stopped streaming once they became pros. And I always talk to them. I'm just like, yo, like why'd you stop streaming? It's like, oh, well, you had a couple of excuses, like, it's a distraction from trying to get better on the team. Fair. But then I asked him, are you playing pubs at night? Yes. Are you playing eights at night? Yeah. Well, why don't you just turn your stream on for a couple hours and just do that? Like, no one's asking you to stream 8 hours a day. Tommy, my co-host on the Flank, like he was an example of someone when he was a pro. He wasn't always able to consistently stream because he was bouncing to place sometimes, depending on where they were competing from. But when he could, he would stream, 8s a night. And that's how I think he was able to start his post playing career with like a really good floor. It then built up with his persona. So I always like tell pros, especially if you come in the league first, like start doing some content. If you don't want to do YouTube, do Twitch. It just has to be a couple hours a day, a couple days a week. You're going to be competing for a long time. So eventually that audience will grow and grow and grow. And by the time you want to do something with it, you'll be at somewhere other than zero. So
Now, is this a conversation that you would have a lot when you were working closely with these players, and giving them this advice, being like, look, because I mean, we've seen Hex talk about it a lot. He's like, look, this is not forever, and you need to make sure that you've got a backup plan, especially too, because I mean, we know a lot of these guys too, they don't have an education background. They don't have a college degree that if gaming doesn't work out for them, competing doesn't work out for them, maybe they don't want to stick with the esports side, like working on the back end. They don't have much to fall back on. So was this a conversation that you would have often with these players?
Mm, so my situation is a little bit different because when I came involved with that COD team, the first iteration of it, like Clay had been streaming for forever, Attach streaming for forever. Same with Zuma, same with Ian. So like Enable, so like that with them didn't even have the conversation. And then the next team, Crowder was also someone who used to stream. And same with, Preston had just started, but like World War II, like that guy was a demon with his stream. Like he was playing like amateur eights every night for like 4 hours. So like didn't even need to have a conversation with them about that. And then when I was dealing with the Fortnite side, like all of those guys streamed because that's how they all blew up. Like it wasn't just by being cracked, like, Fortnite players, like they were all content creators. That was the initial version of the team. And then even the FIFA team, like I was working with Taz. Well, Taz really really blew up on his YouTube game. So I was lucky as far as when I was on the team business side, I never really had to have that conversation. I think post then, like someone that I've tried to talk to a lot to get him to stream is Celium. We had picked him up at the tail end of my tenure at FaZe in Black Ops 4, like when he just became 18 and eligible, and he used to stream like a lot. 'Cause he was like one of those guys like had he's in the sort of golden generation of him, Simp, Abizi, Ellie, Dashu. Dashu had turned pro a little bit earlier than them. But these are guys that had like been winning online tournaments for a while, and like they weren't age eligible to play, and so people knew like they're real prospects. And then like MC came in the league and didn't really stream a lot. And we would always be like, "But I know you're playing at night. I know you're not just sitting there just watching anime." Like, so I've constantly like pressured him to start streaming more. I think the last few years he's actually done that, especially in the beginning and sort of in the off season. Like he's always this off season, like he was on benders, bro. Like he had like multiple 24-hour streams this off season. He's a good example of someone that's like, I think he's got a really funny. If you know him, he's got a very unique and funny personality. And I tell him that it's like, it's like if you do that and you start outside of him being, I think by the time he retires, probably one of the most talented players to ever play COD, like he'll have a brand to build on post gaming career. So that's kind of my perspective on it. I think a lot of people share it. Again, I understand if you're a pro, for some of them, it's hard to do that because you feel like you've got to put all your energy into practice and then the work after practice so you can keep your spot in the league, keep your spot as a top player. But for many of them, I think they have a good security there. And what they're not doing is like doing the brand creation stuff that only takes a couple hours a day, a couple hours a week out of their routine.
Yeah, completely agree. I would compare it to like Mike and I working regular jobs to like an extent. A lot of us when we work these 9 to 5s after, on a Friday, you don't really want to go and do anything afterwards sometimes. You just want to go and chill. So I completely understand after, even seeing like the Boston like boys over there like scrimming and practicing for like hours and hours on end and then coming back and not wanting to stream. I completely understand. But then it's that extra effort that like, a lot of these guys that have blown up, they do put that extra effort to stream and you see the results of it.
You agreed on that.
One thing I wanted to ask, like pivoting off of this topic a little bit, do you feel like there's been somewhat of like a divide between like the casual fan base and the competitive fan base like recently, or because of the type of games coming out?
I think the divide has probably always been there, but I think the last couple of games, once we got away from jetpacks, which is probably the start of it, really, I think it started to become bigger and bigger. You went to multi-platform. I think the SBMM definitely started to get way stronger, started getting rolling out the last couple of years. And then we had really 2 years with Vanguard in the last game where the TTK was like instant. And so that created a very difficult conversation about like how you balance guns, how you play. And I think at that point the divide's definitely gotten a little bit bigger. Keeping in mind that, the competitive scene is 4v4 was 5v5 for a couple of years and back to 4v4 and you get in the pubs and it's usually 6v6 to, whatever. If you're playing like war or something, it's a little more, but yeah, like that on itself always create a little bit of like a disconnect, but I think the last couple of games have made it worse. Just purely on the design decisions they made.
Yeah, because Mike and I have talked about it. Like a lot of our friends, they really liked the MW2 and they liked Vanguard. When both of us, we definitely side more towards the competitive side, and we're always surprised that they actually really really enjoyed that game because I think they feel like they have a better of a chance to win their 101 gunfight because the TTK is so fast. And I know Zuma, or Tommy for people that don't know, he is always saying that casuals really don't care if you take away like sneaking, for example, hot topic that everyone's been talking about. That I will 100% agree with. I know for a fact all my friends that play COD that do not snake, besides Mike and I.
Yeah. Like, I don't think many people even know, like most of them don't even know what that is, So I think that's where it's tough because like, I mean, I think it was one of your last episodes that you guys had done together. This was a huge topic about how there's not enough development and enough care that's gone into the professional side, as compared to the casual side, where I totally agree with that. And I think it's kind of wild that there is so much emphasis on this stuff because at the end of the day, 95% of the people who play this game will play it no matter what. Like people always complain about Call of Duty, how it's the worst thing ever, or this is going to be the one that kills COD. But then all they care about and what you see every time, like a couple weeks after, MW2, #1 selling COD of all time. MW3, #1 selling COD of all time. So they're just like, well, 95% of our player base likes this game. So what's the problem then,
Yeah, I mean, snaking, listen, I'm glad that we were able to, at least in the comp scene for now, get rid of snaking. We'll see how long it sticks for. You go in your average pub, people don't know about getting out of, prone to sprint and all of that. And, that the last point you made is something I brought up a lot on the flank and like goes over people's heads. Like, I don't think they realize that it is for some of the demands of the comp scene, even the Warzone scene. It's some of them may be difficult to do just because people at these studios are going to point to the revenue numbers and say, "Well, clearly we're making the right decisions because you're making money, executive A and C and B. I'm making money as a studio head. So why we change what we're doing? Because we're the biggest entertainment launch of the year. We're one of the top 3 selling COD games of all time. Why would we deviate from the strategy we're doing as far as, launch, MTX, like how we make money over the course of the year?" So it's tough. I don't see how the casual competitive divide as far as game like design and like life flow, like from spawn to dying. Like I just all the pieces of that I just don't see how they get reconciled at a high level because I think the
Mhm.
schools of thought are like completely different, right? Like comp players are not just holding down a lane, locking down a lane when they play pubs, going, sitting on one heady, just kind of farming, popping
Mhm.
UAV. Like comp players want to roam, they want to switch lanes, they want to get more active, get in spawn traps like Snake, like,
Mhm.
so I just don't see how those things get reconciled. But I do think that to the point you made earlier in the show, like there definitely should be attempts to cross over those fans. And I think, get casual fans to know that, hey, there are potentially this event going on in your area. You like Call of Duty, come check it out. There's a thing at this theater, this convention center, and top teams are playing. Might be some Warzone stuff going on there, some COD Mobile stuff. Check it out. You're a COD fan. There's COD stuff going on. Come through and see if you like it.
Now, something going off of that, because I absolutely agree. I mean, that's one of the things that we really like that the Breach does is they do have these watch parties that you can go and actually watch the games. But I was going to ask your thought on this. Do you think there should be way more events going on throughout the year? I mean, I can already kind of assume your answer, but do you think that's a big problem with Call of Duty right now is there's only a handful of live events that you get to go and see these guys play in person as compared to when you're talking about during the MLG CWL like before franchising?
Yeah, I mean, Advanced Warfare and Ghost, like, those games released in November, the season basically ran until September, and you had an event probably like every 3 weeks. And you had your sort of big tent poles, you had champs, and you had these smaller, like plussed up locals, and then you obviously had locals as well. So like there was a lot more events going on than now. When you look at the CDL structure, season starts next weekend. There's 4 majors and then champs. So and champs is like the middle of July, it seems like. So at that point, like, it's what, 8 months to have 5 events is like not a lot. And so I do think there needs to be more events. I think that there needs to be more support and for more like grassroots or more like open based events because right now the way the events are structured doesn't drive participation. The old MLG structure, and you see it with like HCS in the Halo series, Halo Championship Series, for example. The way that works is you've got these partner teams. They're guaranteed to be in the championship pool play. But if you're an open player, if you're a random player, you can sign up, play through the open bracket. And if you play good enough, your team plays good enough, you're going to get into the championship side of the thing. And you get a chance to really place well and actually like maybe crack it as a pro. Right now in COD, that doesn't happen. The last time we had a pro am was Raleigh Major 1 last year. And we're not doing it again this year for no inexplicable, no real reason I assume other than maybe a budget. But we need more events. I think two, if you want are a fan looking for more events, I think they're going to happen in 2 ways. One I think will be good. One I think is going to be majorly controversial. The first way, and they're both involved the same company too. So Esports Engine, as of last January, got bought by parent company or Esports Engine's parent company, Vindex, got bought by a group called Savvy Gaming Group, which is backed by the PIF, which if you're in the finance world or the business world, the PIF is basically the sovereign wealth fund of Saudi Arabia. And Savvy Gaming Group also owns ESL, FaceIt, DreamHack, etc. So now all these production companies, these events, big esports events and gaming festivals are all kind of all under one company. I foresee a world where you're going to get more, probably starting next season, the season after that, like more Call of Duty stuff at DreamHacks, at your ESL one events at IEMs, and so there should be more surface space for these events to happen. What's going to happen though, where I think the controversy is going to start to happen, is you're probably going to see You know, you guys have probably heard about Esports World Cup, which is the old Gamers 8 festival that Saudi Arabia used to run. They basically announced about a month or two ago that they're rebranding it to this Esports World Cup thing. Expectation is, you know, Activision, Blizzard, Microsoft titles will probably be there next year. So you're gonna have, you know, you're gonna have Call of Duty event in Saudi Arabia, which, you know, that's a whole can of worms. So I see more events happening in the future. I think it's a great pathway to get more growth and engagement. I think they're going to theoretically, these additional service based events would be more open or should be more open participation stuff. So like you get that funnel of people wanting to come to participate and then they'll stay around to watch when their team gets eliminated. So hopefully we go down that path because this limited sort of like franchise model where we only get 5 events in 7 months is just it's bad. And then you end up having most of the real competition is these online matches, which, you know, they're great in December and January when I've seen the teams play for the first time. I'm telling you, people really aren't tuning in April and May to watch bottom teams in the league play each other for games that really don't have championship stakes to them.
That's totally fair. That's definitely like regular sports too. Why would well, what's the incentive of watching a bottom tier like team in the NFL that you know that's not going to make it to the playoffs?
Like the Patriots right now.
Bro, like listen, I'm a Giants fan, and the next Monday Night Football game is the Giants versus the Packers. The Packers might make the playoffs. Giants are 4-8. They're not making the playoffs.
Yeah,
Like,
bro, we're dedicated Pats fans here. I mean, we don't want to talk about it. You know?
bro, you're the Giants, dude. The Giants and the Pats just played each other. Let me tell you, that was game was entertaining, but entertaining if you're a sicko football fan. Not because it was now because it was last night's, you know, Eagles.
Bills.
Last night's Cowboys Seahawks game that ended up like 35-40, or you know, Washington Oregon tonight that should be in our high scoring game. Like those are entertaining games. But yeah, I feel you in that. That's the problem with they misjudge. I think again because trying to be too much like the NFL, to be like the NBA, they want to have this regular season that gets into the playoffs. But really, that's backwards to like what we've learned in esports over the years, which is people don't want to see random online matches. They want to see more events. They want to see people on stage. That feeds into a point system, determines who makes it to the postseason event, and then that's your real like apex moment. So we'll see. We'll see if the scene in Activision Blizzard, now they merge with Microsoft, like they kind of figure out how to go back to the roots of what made it good to begin with.
Yeah. Now, something I want to go ask you, because I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that aren't familiar with him and his work, Adam Apicella. I know you're very close with this guy. When the CWL, or when that was around and it was like MLG as well, he had a big impact on what was going on with the scene. How do you think he would have run that differently? Can you give some insight into how it would have been if it stayed like that?
If Adam was like the commissioner of the CDL instead of like Johanna, what you're saying?
Well, yeah, that, but if it didn't end up going into more of this franchise league that we have now, like, because building off of what you said, it's now a lot of people who are trying to run this like it's the NFL, like it's the NBA. How do you think for our audience it would have been? Because I think you would give some good insight since you worked so closely
I
with
think
him.
what you would have gotten is what HCS year one ended up being, which is you would have had these. I think it would have pivoted because basically what they were experimenting with. So Adam's probably talked about this a bit on I think some podcasts, and I've talked about it of like MLG the last couple of years, the CWL predecessor of the CDL sort of transition more to league formats that would then like transition nicely into the franchise model. But where Halo went actually, which is where I think Call of Duty would have gone if CDL didn't happen, is okay. You would have had these partner teams that have guaranteed spots. They get revenue, they get MTX, they get a lot of benefits, but they're not all the teams that compete at the top level. There's a feeder for other teams to be involved with those competitions. So I think what Adam probably would have done if he were in that position is advocated for what you saw with Halo, which is they don't have these regular season online matches. They have the occasional, you know, pro series, which is basically the LAN format. They just do it online for points for seeding. And then you would have your sort of LAN temples that all feeds into sort of an end of season event with LCQ before it. I think you would have gotten the Halo format in COD. And that's what was basically the MLG way for a very long time. It's just a slight twist on it with the partner model. And that would have gotten you the best of both worlds. You would have been able to bring in maybe some non-endemic partners that want to spin up, make an organization, but they need the guarantee that they can compete at the top level. Okay, get them in the partner program. but you still keep your endemics. You can still keep, the big core fan bases before CDL were FaZe, Optic, towards the tail end, 100 Thieves. Once Nate Shot kind of spun off and did his own thing, and you had some teams sort of scatter fan bases in Europe from some of the big organizations like a Vitality, Heretics obviously has a very big fan base now getting back involved, and those were the sort of temples. And then you kind of blew that up and brought these new brands in. So that's how I think Adam would have done it. And when I've talked to him about it, because I know he's not a major fan of the city-based franchising. I think that would have satisfied some of the desire to have a sort of like tiered system, but still like not really get rid of the participation in the path to pro element that I think made esports great prior to the franchise model rolling out in Activision Blizzard esports and Riot esports, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Really quick, do you think that the path to pro, like when there's some of these other franchise leagues and sports, you can see that there is a path? Like if you're going to be in any of them, there is college levels that you can be playing at. There's, scouts that are going to be eventually recruiting or do look to recruit. Um, do you think that Call of Duty or esports in general, do you think it will grow to that at some point where there will be universities that have majors for esports, or they have that as a sport, where there will be scouts from FaZe or from Optic that are looking to bring these people on, and have them on an amateur team, or maybe if they really show out, they can have them on a professional team?
I think so, because I think the biggest barrier to that right now are probably two entities: the NCAA, which we probably spent 2 hours talking about the issues of the NCAA. And then, I think probably the other kind of barrier is, you guys know the Endeavor Talent Agency, right?
Mhm.
Well, they own a lot of, or they have the intellectual property rights on a lot of like branding and merchandise for a lot of these major Power Five and other universities. And so, anytime you do any kind of big college thing that are using for that official branding instead of like an offshoot esports firm branding, like they're gonna need to be at the table. So that's the complexities of building something bigger out than what you've seen with these grassroots efforts like College COD, which I think is great. And we've seen some College COD players like Dan Gosi actually make it to the pro level, and he, ended up on Optic last year. Like they were a very good team, made a grand finals. Like, and Dan's obviously on LA Thieves now. I do think eventually there'll be scouts. I do, but that's I think 10, 15 years down the line. I don't think there's a 5-year thing. I don't think the organizations are going to spend that money, the 70 or 80 grand a year for a scout for the possibility of finding somebody. This isn't like, this isn't like the NFL where you have a 50-man roster. So if you're investing, low 6 figures into a scout and they bring you like one or two absolute diamond in rough guys, like you've already made that value in spades, you would have to find on a 4-man esports team like quite a few people for it to be worthwhile. But I do think eventually the organizations will get big enough, then the collegiate and the high school levels especially will get built out enough that I think definitely those will be worth paying attention to if you're in Oregon starting to like, find people, and maybe, once they get of age, actually start like tendering content deals and start to get their sort of rights to be able to tender a contract to them. I do think we'll eventually go down that path.
I know Mike and I we've seen a lot of college players like over at Helix where the breach practice. They host a lot of like college tournaments, and a lot of like the New England colleges are always there like competing. Um, and I think that's great. That's great that Breach is doing that just to show out like there's talent out there even at the college level. You don't need to not go to college and just do this full time if you don't want to. There is another path. Um, Obviously, it's a lot harder going that route, but you know,
But yeah, more colleges need to do this though, man, because when you were at UMass Amherst, didn't you play on a team, or you played some games at a college level?
yeah, I played like at tournaments and stuff, but I was never on the official team. Because they're, I mean, again, they're scrimming like 8 to 10 hours a day. I'm like, I can't do that with my like college classes. um, but it wasn't fully developed like it is now. Like there are colleges now that have a full out esports like program.
Yeah. Yeah, there are like a number of, I think that like sort of temple college COD schools like Northwood that really have offered like full rides to people. I think it's just really early in that space though.
Mhm.
Um because I think what they're the major market is really amateur players who used to be pros or borderline pros, trying to get them to sort of not ring, but like, sort of buy in the top end of being able to get that prestige win. But I do think what you're going to see with these esports as they exist in 10 or 15 years is you're going to have a like lower level of competition at the middle school, high school level, especially for more mature titles, because you're not going to see that at the elementary level. But once people come of age to actually play the game, they'll be able to do it. And then there'll be some kind of college level competition of what that exists. And then you've got the pro side of it. I know for the publishers, the reason the publishers have tried to get into the college space, but again, for the reasons I outlined earlier, aka the NCAA and the talent agencies, I think it's hard for them to have really built anything, something crazy major, just because of the amount of stakeholders and regulations and other policy that sort of exists in order to really build something good. On top of the fact that in collegiate sports anyway, I think the NCAA is eventually not going to exist. But again, that's a topic for not the COD Casuals. That may be for more of a sports podcast.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see where we end up with it over the course of 5 to 10 years. Because I mean, like with the kids that I work with every day, I mean, that's the one thing that they can pretty much all talk about is esports or talk about gaming.
Yeah.
They all talk about it's either Fortnite or it's Warzone, you know? And it's like that's their future. Like a lot of those kids, they want to either be content creators or they want to go and like I've told them like, have you ever thought about being a pro player? And they're like, you can actually do that. I'm like, oh yeah, you can. Like you can just play for a living, you know. Which I think nowadays that's way more common. Like most people today, would they want to play video games for a living or they want to build their whole life around
Yeah.
like playing games or making content.
Yeah, it's that. It wasn't like that when I grew up. I
Yeah.
graduated like not that long ago.
Mhm.
But like 10 years ago. But like, yeah, I think eventually for people that are in school now, that is a path. I would say like for being, like a top level pro, one that's you're there for a couple of years, like that's the 1% of the 1%. Like it is a difficult role. But I do think that you're going to see a path where, you know, people can go to college and get a ride and scholarship to be able to, learn, but also compete. And then post graduation, maybe there's an opportunity for them, competing at a high level in one of these organizations. I don't think that's 5-year horizon. I think that is a lot longer than that. But and who knows what titles we're going to be playing 10 years down the line? Might be playing VR by then. We might not be on PC. Who knows?
Yeah,
But
who knows?
I do think that esports is here to stay, and it's so early. I mean, this is like I'm comparing this to like we're only in like to use the MLB terms, like we are in like 1900s, 1910s baseball. Like we're not like in the like big bright lights like cookie cutter arena era. Like this is really early. The organizations themselves, from a business standpoint, are fairly early stage. Even though they raised a lot of money, those businesses generally haven't really blossomed to be able to match that kind of raise potential. Like we're still very early in the industry, and on all sides of it, I think there's still a lot of growth to be had.
Completely agree, Ben. I know we hit the 1 hour mark, but we just want to say, thank you for coming on. Like we appreciate you like taking the time, just chopping it up with us. We've got like, some quick questions that we just want to like end with. So we'll start off with the first one. Are you excited about like basically all East Coast events this year?
Am I excited?
And what city are you excited to come visit?
I kind of like all the cities. I mean, look, I would have liked some West Coast or at least a Europe event this year. So that kind of really sucks. Like, would love to have gone to like a London or Madrid and West Coast. Like, we haven't been to Anaheim in years, and that's always been like used to be like the prestige event. Like, we've never done an event in Seattle. California, we haven't been to in a while. Vegas was great last year, even though I stayed a couple days too much longer in Vegas after that event, which was a mistake. I was there for like 9 days. It was
Ooh.
like 7 days too many.
9 days in Vegas.
Oh, dude, it's
Damn.
bad by the end because my friend
You must have been like
Nameless,
white.
yeah, so my friend Nameless, who's one of the casters in the Call of Duty League, he had his like bachelor party in Vegas after the event. So we had a great time, but like I flew back and I was like, I don't want to talk to anybody for 2 days.
Did you go to the casinos at all, Ben?
I lost too much money. Let's not talk about it. But East Coast events, listen, I'm excited for all of them. I wish the order was a little bit different. Like if it were me, I wish we would go to Charlotte first because I know that even in January, Charlotte would be like pretty good. Florida March is like the best. Like that is prime Florida season right there. I'm bringing my golf clubs. Tom and I already been talking about like doing some really cool stuff at that event. Um, I'm excited for Boston Major 1, even though it's going to be in the winter. Last year, venue is great, by the way. MJ Music Hall, completely new venue, super nice, great sightlines no matter where you sit. The Boston team's great at planning. It just sucked last year how cold it was. And that, like,
Yeah.
I would love if it was like, it would be a banger if they were running those events like same time that baseball games are going on, like at Fenway, and you can,
Oh
like,
my
you know what I mean?
God.
Like that would be sick, but it sucks that they, where they could fit in the calendar. But I still think the event would be good. For me, the event now, like with Anaheim not being a yearly thing, there's one event now that we've ran pretty much every year that I love, and that's Toronto. I'm a New Yorker, so Toronto to me is basically like Canada's version of New York, and I always love going there. And again, they keep doing it like end of May, June, so it's like perfect time, like spring, like another event I'm bringing my golf clubs to because let me tell you, the golf in Toronto is great. But I always go there for like a full week. Like I literally normally I fly to events on like a Tuesday, sit up Wednesday, Thursday to Friday, Saturday, Sunday's the event, and fly on Monday. Usually stay Monday, play golf, and then fly out that night. Toronto, I always am like, because I got friends in Toronto. I'm like, listen, I'm getting first flight from Columbus, Ohio. I'm there like 7:50 a.m. on that customs line. Like I'm good to go 8:30. Like Monday, like let's go play 18 when I get in. So I'm excited for that. And then the rumor for champs that's been reported is Dallas, downtown Dallas at the American Airlines Arena, which would be really cool. Because that area is actually really nice in Dallas. If you've ever been down there, it's sort of like the arena kind of arts district of Dallas, which is really nice. We've been out at Arlington the last couple of years, which I really like. ESA Esports Stadium Arlington space that Optic runs is really nice, but Arlington is that part of Arlington's a very like they've just started building the area up because you have Esports Stadium Arlington, you've got the new ballpark, you've got the old ballpark, and you've got AT&T Stadium. So it's more of like a sports complex. It's really more of a suburban area than it is like downtown Dallas, which is just popping. So that's kind of my assessment of the event space this year. But I wish we had a West Coast event this year, man. I wish we were going to like California or Vegas again or Seattle or something like that. And I wish we were going to an event in Europe. I was excited. I was like, let's Heretics come in and we do something in Madrid, like London. We talked about a London event for forever, still hasn't happened since the first year of COD, like first year of the CDL. Like it sucks because I've been to London a couple of times. It's a great city.
Yeah, I always feel for the European fans.
Yeah, they've gotten screwed big time.
Yeah. I mean, some of it is they've gotten screwed because of two reasons. One is that to run events in Europe, like I say, a CDL event, the CDL Activision, all of their gear, all of their stuff is in the US. So monitors, even stuff like monitors, is like getting that in Europe. I can tell you is not easy. Like it is hard. PCs, the production gear, you need a lot of help on the ground in Europe from either a local production partner or from the franchises because it's sort of the whole home market area thing. There used to be a London franchise. So the cost driver, and then that's not even accounting for like T&E for everybody, right? The travel from everybody coming over from North America. So there's that. And I think the other issue is just like some again NFL NBA people being concerned about like time zone stuff, which I think is not a valid complaint of like, oh well, then we're not live like prime time hours, East Coast, West Coast time, the US. And I'm like, well, you're thinking about this the wrong way. Like Saturday, Sunday, and people are passionate about esports, and it's like February. Like, where do you think people are? On the East Coast, they're at home because it's snowing outside. Like maybe on the West Coast a little bit differently because the weather's always nice on the West Coast unless you're in Pacific Northwest, but or like Wyoming. But I don't think that was a valid complaint. So that's why we haven't had a European event in a couple of years. I think once we move away from the franchise model, because the savvy group that Esports Engine, ESL, Face It, whatever, they run a lot of events in Europe. I think we'll start to see them come back. We'll probably see at least one. Probably, I hope next year after, maybe expand beyond that. But man, those European crowds. If you go watch videos of like CWL London, CDL London, um, any European Counter Strike event, European League of Legends event, you're going to realize very differently how much better. This is not to diss on North American crowds or fans, but how much better the European fans and the like environment European events are. It's actually crazy. They know what they're doing.
Yeah, I want to go to one really bad. Again, like there hasn't been many East Coast events in terms of COD until like now lately.
Yeah.
And I mean, Mike and I are taking full advantage of that. You know, we're gonna be at Boston. Super excited for it. Like you said, I wish it was during the spring, but because Boston during the springtime is amazing.
It's
The energy,
beautiful. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it is.
I,
Well, and that was good about the New York event too, because that was our first major that we'd ever gone to, and that was an awesome venue.
Yeah, it was an awesome venue in a weird spot in the city. I'm gonna be honest. It's a
It
cool
was.
cool venue, but I mean that part of Brooklyn's a little, we'll say,
Tough.
interesting.
Mhm.
It's tough.
It's tough because New York's an expensive market to run events. I feel for the Subliners team, but yeah, I mean we historically haven't had events in New York or Boston for a very long time in COD up until the last couple of years. As far north as they used to go was like Philly. UMG would run events in Philly, but like I like generally MLG, CWL was always like as far north they would go as like South Carolina, North Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
on the East Coast side.
There was what year was it? It was like MLG Providence. I remember I was begging my parents to like
Oh, it's so
bring me
long
to
ago.
it. Yeah.
I want to say Province is like 2011,
Yeah,
2012.
2011 sounds right. I just
It's
remember
so
begging
long.
my parents to bring me. They were like, "What? We're not
Yeah.
driving you there."
And Province is pretty nice. We
Mhm.
drive through it a lot. I used to go to Cape Cod vacations with my family.
Oh
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with the Province area, but I'm glad. Listen, and the Boston team I think is committed to really activating that area on a yearly basis. The venue is beautiful. It's a beautiful space. I think last year they had challengers. They had their amateur competition at Fenway, which is cool, but it was literally too cool. So, as in the air with a box, they were doing like a luxury box slash like hospitality space. It's obviously built for when baseball is going on from like April to, you know, to October. And Fenway's not a new stadium, one of the oldest stadiums in baseball. So I wouldn't say the heating is readily available in that space. So they've moved, I think, across the street to House of Blues this year, which should be a little bit of a better experience. But I'm excited for Boston. We've already got like Tom and I, we already booked like our hotels for that event. I already got plans on like where I want to eat. I've been talking to one of the pro players, hang out, obviously friends with a couple pro players, but like a couple people I always like sightsee with the days after events where I like, do all this because some of their like some of them haven't done like the Tour C Boston stuff, like, you know, seeing all the Revolutionary War
Mhm.
stuff, like, City Hall, like all that stuff. So we'll do that on the Monday after the event. Hopefully not too hungover.
Yeah.
Because last year was bad. Last year we went to the casino Sunday night, and
You don't remember that night?
no, I remember, but the problem is
Oh,
I
that's
had to
good.
record a video Monday morning, and I woke
Oh,
up and
Jesus Christ.
I was like, oh my god, I made a huge fucking mistake of my life.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
Pedialyte was right next to you the entire
I
time.
I listen. I pre-bought Gatorade, so at least I like did that part
Oh, there
right.
you go.
But
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
I
You had a
was,
game plan.
dude, I went back and watched that video recently. I was like, man, I'm really hungover in this video. Luckily, we went and got like I went and got like pad thai after the video. Shout out Jerica, who's Simp, one of the pro players, girl. She was like, "Yeah, let's go get pad thai before we go do some sightseeing." I'm like, "Oh, please, I beg of you. This food was the best." But yeah, no, I'm excited. I'm excited for Boston. Excited for Florida. We haven't been back there in a sec. Slash Miami area, and then Toronto. Obviously, we were there last year. Always a great event. And then Carolina. We haven't done a Charlotte event in a while for COD, so that should be cool. And then obviously seems like we're going back to Dallas, which is sort of a yearly. We've been going to Dallas every year for like 7 years. So it's always a good time in Texas.
Yeah, we want to make it out to Texas at some point. We haven't been to a Texas event.
Dallas is nice. Big metro area. Um, Obviously it seems like they're gonna be doing it at the NBA arena downtown, which will be really nice because it's one of the best NBA arenas in the country. Um, And Dallas is a cool city. There's a lot to do in Dallas. Food, entertainment, nightlife. Like if you guys go down, I think you'll have a good experience. I will say if it's like though, middle of July, you're not gonna be wearing pants. So
Oh
you
yeah,
can kind of
No.
leave all that winter gear, all that long
No.
sleeve gear away. I'm telling you, it's gonna be pretty warm in
yeah.
Dallas.
Ain't bringing this. No way.
No,
No.
it's gonna be like 90
Fuck
degrees,
that.
brother. Like
Yeah.
you're gonna want t-shirts, shorts. Definitely don't be wearing any black shirts. Because then you're gonna sweat through them. If you got that nice synthetic gear, that'll be the best call.
Yeah, we're
No,
not
you
us East
joke.
Coasters. We're not
You
built for that.
you joke, but like, because I have to set up our situation events, and like I always wear. Anything is like, especially on those Wednesdays, I always wear like, especially when we're at summer events, and they're not always pumping the AC in the building on Wednesdays because if people isn't there yet.
Oh
I always
Jesus.
like golf polos, like synthetic
Oh.
shirts, because it's just like, bro, it is. It ain't Boston in January, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I mean, man, it's funny because like we've been in New England our whole life. Like, sometimes like, yeah, you got those hot summer days, but man, they don't compare because I'm a big F1 fan, and I remember I went to this was a couple years ago. I went to the Circuit of the Americas there for the race, and I couldn't believe how fucking hot it was.
I lived in
I
Austin,
was
bro. I feel you on that. Oh my God,
I
like,
was like, I was stunned. I was like, it was hot anyway where we were in New England. I was like, all right, I'll bring my shorts, bring some shirts, will be good. You know, no, it was a whole nother level.
there's no
I don't know
clouds,
how you can
bro.
survive out there.
There's no
There's none.
clouds, there's no trees
There's
at
no
Circuit of
wind.
Americas.
There's no wind.
There's no wind. It's a dry heat. I lived in Austin for like 6 years, and I could tell you, like, the winters are great because it's like light jacket season. At best, maybe a light fleece. But man, the summers are brutal, bro. You go outside and you're like, yeah, I'm good. You're like, I'm good. I'm gonna, I think I'll stay in my apartment today. But yeah, I feel you on that. Luckily, like middle of July won't be too bad for Dallas. If it was like the beginning, we used to have champs like beginning and middle August. That is when it goes from being like 96, 98 to being like 105. And
Oof.
then you're really in, in different territory at that point.
Man, that sounds rough.
Yeah,
No,
I
nothing
lived through it
ready.
for 6 years. Let me tell you, it's not great.
Yeah,
Like I said, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I went to go visit Austin like a couple weeks back, and it was still 95 degrees,
Yeah.
and it was so hot.
It is, and then like the fall in Austin's weird because you get like in Texas because you get a lot of they go through the smoky season there, where they get sometimes the blowover from the fires in Central America, like farming, agriculture stuff, and then you get this weird like it's hot and then it's also like smoky. It's just gross. You go from the summer being hot to like this couple weeks in the fall where it's just like you don't want to be outside, the air quality and like, but the trade off is that November, December, January, February, March are beautiful there because it's like maybe at highest 60s, at lowest if you get a freeze, it's like in the 30s. It never really gets colder than the 30s. Mostly just like perfect light jacket weather season. Like Austin's got a big like rooftop bar, outdoor bar scene, and they break the heaters out if it's cold, but it's still like, dude, like it was always the best in the winter because you could still sort of hang out. But here, like I live in Columbus, Ohio. I'm telling you, like in like 3 weeks, like it's gonna be like I'm not going outside to like my friends are like want to do stuff. I'm like, just make sure it's indoors at a place. I don't gotta like, trek too far because it might be 20 degrees and
right.
windy. You just never know. It's less bad in Columbus. I have a friend of mine who used to live in Chicago, and that's the place where if you ask me to visit Chicago in December, I'm saying hell no. January.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll come
You're
for a couple
asking for
days,
it.
but outside that, not it.
Yeah, well, Ben, just want to say, like, thank you for hopping on. Wanted to end it off with one question. What advice would you give like your younger self after knowing, all the stuff that you've learned so far?
Younger self. I would say the biggest piece of advice I'd give to my younger self is just valuing relationships more. The biggest piece of advice I can give to anybody, especially if you're trying to get involved in the gaming, the esports scene, because it's so new, is a lot of it is how a lot of it is relationship based, and and what you know in your relationships with people. So like not burning bridges, always trying to maintain those relationships is really key because you never know when you're going to connect with those people again. So that would be a piece of advice I'd give to a younger version of myself.
I love it.
Great advice. Because Mike and I have definitely realized that.
Yeah, relationships are everything, 100%.
Very, very important. But yeah, Mike, do you have anything else?
I don't think so, man. I think we're go here. Yeah, I don't think so.
All right. Well, yeah, Ben, again, thank you.
Thank you.
For coming on. We were very surprised that you DM'd us back very quickly. And
I
just
was
wanted
mid flank when you messaged me and I was mid flank and I was like, I bet I'm down. Like,
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
yeah. I was like, we were doing that the like the snake we were talking about GAs and I was like,
Mhm.
I think like Chris and Pat were arguing and I was like tuning out for a sec. I saw you guys DM me. I was like, oh, I bet. Like, oh, actually, let's do it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
like,
Okay, great.
yeah. And just so you know too, like the whole reason why Mike and I started the COD Casuals because we saw you and Tommy starting the flank and you guys were talking about competitive COD and we just always felt like there was not really a voice for like just a lot of casual players that want to get into the competitive scene. And don't get me wrong, like for the most part, Mike and I agree with everything that you and Tommy say. But you know, there's a lot of casual fans that don't even know that competitive Call of Duty is like a thing. So
Yeah.
we want more and more people to like jump in the scene.
Yeah, that's been our goal since day one.
Yeah. And we didn't talk much about Warzone on this. Like, I think probably the same for a lot of people that grind Warzone as well. You know, like listen, I'll tell this story just the end. Like, and I've said this a couple times, like, big inspiration for me and Tom starting the flank was actually Hector Rodriguez over at Optic. Because back when I used to manage Tom and we'd go over to the Hex Quarters, a famous space that Hector had in Frisco, which actually I believe they literally closing down like this weekend. Weirdly enough for the story, but anyway, it was a great Hex Quarters story and timing on that. Was we'd go there for boot camps and Hector would hear me and Tom like argue or some irrelevant BS. And he's like, dude, you two need to get a content. You two need to make content together. Like, I think there's literally, if you Google it, I think if you Google like me, Tommy, Hector tweet, I think you'll find a tweet from Hector from like probably like 2017 or something. Like, I would pay any amount of money to have Zuma and Ben do like a content series together. And so when Tom retired, like, we had the Nameless had done a show that was similar but slightly different called the Podcast, but he had stopped and Tom were like, well, that's a little bit of inspiration. But I'm glad that you guys have taken root on that. I know that repulls and the Pulse Check, which is they sort of do what we do, but for the Warzone scene, is our show. I think anyone that creates more content around the COD scene is great. I know talking to people at Activision Blizzard, they're always very supportive of shows like this because to them, they just want the community to interact with each other in any form. So I'm glad that we were able to inspire you guys and thank you guys for inviting me. And I'm happy to come on whenever, man. Like if you guys want to shoot the breeze every couple of months, let me know. I'm always down to hop on.
Yeah,
Hell yeah, man. We love that.
Yeah,
Thank
man,
you again.
we appreciate it. Yeah, and we want to say too, like if I know you guys are coming to Boston, probably don't need anything, but again, like anybody that comes on the show, we always say if you ever need anything, feel free to send us DM anything. Not transactional. We're here, like want to be your friend, anything you need, just let us know.
Listen, if you guys got good restaurant and bar recommendations in Boston, send them my way because
I got you.
we'll
We'll
hit
send you a list.
I'm starting to lock. I'm starting to lock them in because I'm like, I'm gonna get to do like one nice dinner on like Wednesday night before when the events start. I'm out of there by like 10:30.
Mhm.
I'm like whatever's open at that point. But
yeah, bro, when we see you at the event, we'll let you know.
I bet
we'll be there.
Just if you guys got a list, or anyone watching the show is a list.
DM you, yeah.
My DMs are open. Just let me know because like Tom and I especially are always trying to find. We're Tuesday and Wednesday are the best days for us. We're always trying to find and get good local spots. So people have recommendations. We're down to check them out.
100%.
Oh yeah. Well, again, thank you everyone for listening. This has been episode 148 of the COD Casuals. Again, thank you to Ben for giving us his time and hopping on. We're on anchor.fm/the COD Casuals. We're on all streaming platforms. If you're listening on Spotify, we would appreciate a 5-star review because it definitely helps us out a ton. We also post a poll and question over there too, so we'd love to see what you guys think. We're also posting on Instagram and TikTok, so if you guys don't want to listen to the whole episode, you can go over there. We clip it up and you can go check everything out there. And I think that's it, man.
Yeah, and it will also be sure to include every link for Ben's socials in the description as well. So be sure, if you don't follow him, you do have a streaming schedule that you stick to. You're also, like I said, host of the Flank, so you guys are always going live whenever. So be sure to give him a follow on Twitter to know whenever he's going live, to check out his stuff as well, because we watch it. It's good stuff.
Especially if you like
Appreciate
sports, go check Ben
Yeah.
out.
I chat a
Yeah.
lot about sports. You know,
Yeah.
I'm about to have a.
Yeah.
I'm excited for the next couple of days. You're a sports fan. Is where we get to like the tail end of the college football season. We had the last ever Pac-12 game tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited for that. So.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. This has been episode 148 of the COD Casuals. We're your host, Justin.
And I'm Mike.
And we'll see you guys next week.
Take it easy, everybody.
So, yeah.